So I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. Moved away for a while. I was practicing in Michigan for a while and came back recently, so I'm glad to be close enough to come down. Gotta have priorities.
The TV go off?
Yes.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me? All right. So the first presentation I was hoping to share with you today was just showing a new prosthetic partial foot design that we've come up with fairly recently, so we're not fully completed, but I just thought it would be cool to show the process that we've come up with recently. So obviously most of us know once a partial foot happens, there's multiple lengths that an amputation can happen, and the more proximal that amputation, the more muscular balance we have, right? So how do we restore that lever arm? How do we get them into a more symmetric gait? And then looking at how people walk, right? We're looking at that reduced lever arm, which tends to put more stress on their sound side because they're coming off their amputation quickly. And so how do you provide a device that's going to accomplish stability, responsiveness, and symmetric gait? Most of us are familiar with all the different designs that can occur depending on the length of that amputation. So it can be anything from a toe filler with an inlay. It can be kind of a combination. A lot of people, I think, recently that I've seen at least, are starting to use more of that off-the-shelf AFO style with some kind of socket underneath, right? Either an inlay or a more contained socket. And so ours kind of uses a combination of a lot of different design aspects. So this is a case study on one patient, very active guy. He's a hospice priest. He's on his feet all day, loves hiking, walking with his wife, really a great guy. He actually had his amputation many, many years ago and has had pretty much every single design you could have with a prosthesis, from the bivalve with the carbon plate underneath to some more modern, I guess I'll say, designs that use the off-the-shelf style AFOs with different socket designs. So this is what he came in with. He actually has two devices that he came to our office with. This is probably his most successful recent design. He actually got it in Germany many years ago, I think 7 or 8, 10 years ago. And overall it was working really well compared to his other devices, but his limb has changed a little bit. So the socket portion of it, you can kind of see the green inlay. That's where his residual limb would go. And he just had a lot of anterior pressure of his lateral malleolus. The AFO, just from many years of use, just wasn't providing the same support and stability. So he was looking for something different. So just to show you some video of him walking, I'll let him play for a few minutes or a few seconds so you can see. Obviously in mid-stance he has a slight varus thrust. Coronally, sagittally, you can see that shortened step length. And one thing I noticed pretty significantly, he has hyperextension at mid to late stance. And I feel like he has a dorsiflexed posture to his ankle through mid stance to late stance. So this was his first design. And this is just showing those angles pretty generally of where he was at mid to late stance. So he wasn't aware that he was hyperextending. I think it was just over time, some habit that he created for stability. So I pointed it out to him, and he's been trying to be more aware and cognizant of it. But this shows just the general design, and you can see on the sagittal plane in mid stance just that dorsiflexed appearance of his ankle. This was his second partial foot design. So as that first one just wasn't working anymore, he went to a facility that provided this, and you can see the difference in the socket portion. He just didn't have a lot of stability in that AP plane, much more in the ML plane, and he just didn't feel like he was getting enough support during stance phase. So this is him walking with this one. Let's let it play for a second. Kind of the same situation where we're seeing obviously knee hyperextension, kind of that dorsiflexed ankle at mid stance. I think slightly better on sound side step, but still just not able to be as active as he wants to be. And this was more coming from him and what he was experiencing outside the clinic. Again, showing those angles, relatively similar in knee hyperextension, pretty straight in mid stance, but what I noticed was a slight anterior lean and that dorsiflexed ankle at mid stance. So just not quite getting that smooth gait pattern. So with the current design, what we wanted to resolve were all the things. He wanted everything that he could possibly get. So he wanted the flexibility of the device, but responsiveness and stability, decreasing his energy, decreasing the whole weight of the system, increasing suspension. So he kind of wanted everything. So we're trying to accomplish all those things. But so what we ended up doing was deciding to make an HCR socket to provide the cushion around those sensitive areas, the suspension we were hoping for. So this is the first step. Obviously casting was first, but this is the first fit. You can see where we were marking areas that we wanted to modify. So we drilled holes in the silicone. I don't know how many people work with silicone, but it's really nice because you can drill holes, you can modify on the socket, on the mold, and kind of get that same feel for what you saw in the test socket. And we just made note of areas that he had those increased sensitivities, so that when we went to the modification process, we were able to, again, mark those areas. And we have an anesthesiologist on staff, so she can kind of custom make what we need. So she used liquid silicone in that anterior portion. Sorry, it's not too bright. But on the anterior portion of his limb, we were able to use a liquid silicone that's really soft along the lateral malleolus. And then we were able to use a combination of a soft, like a 35 durometer silicone with a 65 durometer silicone to provide the stability and the softness we needed. And we actually, so on this last slide, sorry, I meant to mention, you can kind of see a transition where the top, maybe a half inch, is clearer. We used a matrix to provide some of that stability we wanted, but it ended up being really tight for him to get on. So in the next design process of it, we kept the silicone more proximal without the matrix, so he could really stretch to don the prosthesis, and then the matrix lowered to provide the stability we wanted. And then you can also see a lip around the proximal portion of it, so that he had something to grasp when donning. And this is a image of him inside the socket. He was actually able to get it with a sock. He liked wearing a Swiftwick sock just for sweat, decrease irritation. We did try both without the sock and with, and he just preferred it with. So it gave the stability he needed. He was actually able to walk without anything. He can walk without anything, but comfortably, not any pressures. So we used this as the first design. And he wanted something similar to that one that worked for a long period of time. So we trialed just taking an off-the-shelf foot shell and modifying a little bit so he could don. Just see, like, is our thought process working? So it worked to a point, but there was a lot of movement within the foot shell. He was getting a lot of anterior pressure on the exact spot that he had sensitivities, just where the transition of the foot shell to the silicone came. So we decided, well, if we could just take the foot shell and transition it proximal onto his limb, maybe that would take away the pressures in that area. So we tried a 3D print design. We've been working with a company we're trying to dabble with 3D printing. It wasn't as successful as we hoped. You can see it's kind of a beast of a foot shell. We barely fit it into, luckily I have the same shoe size as most guys, so I just brought in an extra pair of my shoes, and I could barely get it into the shoe. So it was a great trial. The downsides, obviously other than size, were the transition on the inside. It just provided too much stability. It was just too rigid. So we kind of changed our process and went to a silicone foot. We actually had this in the office, and we just decided to put them together just to see if, was the silicone too heavy? That was why we didn't go there first. We were too afraid that it would just add too much weight to the device. But it was actually pretty lightweight. He didn't notice the difference, and it provided the shape A we needed for the shoe, but it also combined the silicones together, and he didn't feel that there was a lot of motion as compared to the other devices. So it kind of fit all of those needs that we needed. And we're in the process of making a one-piece silicone foot now, using the aspects of the socket that were beneficial for him, but the shell, so that he doesn't have to take all these pieces out when he's trying to don the prosthesis, to try to make it a little bit easier and more efficient. So we trialed 2 different designs. So all of his other designs had the anterior panel AFL. I didn't know if he needed that much, so I tried a posterior and the anterior approach. And what we found was he actually really liked the posterior approach. Actually really helped, I think, give him that little bit of kinesthetic reminder to not hyperextend. But when he was really active in hiking, he noticed that the anterior panel gave him more support and more leverage. So we're actually trying for both designs so that he can have one for just day-to-day use, hopefully help prevent some of the hyperextension so we can save his posterior capsule, but then when he is really active, he can throw on the anterior panel and be able to accomplish what he wants. So this is him walking. Unfortunately, when he had like a week trial with some of the pieces and parts that we used through figuring out the process, and after that week, he was walking really, really well. I still think he's walking pretty good in this, but I think after having that adaptation period, he was walking better. You can still see some knee hyperextension. So we've talked about that, but his hyperextension got better with time. And I also spoke to him about going back to physical therapy to help with some muscular balance. So this is showing, at least 4 to 5 degrees less of hyperextension. And again, when he had it for that week, it was better. I apologize for not having those pictures. And then I think just his rollover just seemed much smoother with this design. So I just wanted to show the different points of mid-stance with each design. So the first, second, and third from, your left to right. Just showing that difference in posture. Again, in that first slide, he looks a little more anterior leaning, more, slightly more dorsiflexion in his foot compared to the last slide where he seems more upright and less hyperextension. And then in late stance, that difference. So yeah, we're talking about a few degrees, but a few degrees less is always better than more. So again, we've talked about how we can adapt as he starts wearing the prosthesis more, how we can try to accomplish less hyperextension. And I think therapy will help with that as well, just through some knee training and some strengthening. And just to end it, I put up some slides of him just walking on a ramp. Just really being able to have the stability and responsiveness he wanted. And again, we're still in the process, so we haven't created that one-piece foot shell yet. And then just to finish on stairs. So, really what we wanted to accomplish was, obviously there's a lot of different designs that you can fit a patient with a partial foot amputation. And for what he needed, we really felt like HCR fit that need for increased suspension, cushion in areas that can have a lot of sensitivity, without having to do a more, I would say, maybe bulkier design. So we kind of did a trial with it first to make sure it was successful before moving towards authorization. Luckily, he is workers' comp, so it did give us a little bit of flexibility with that to make sure it worked. But So we just wanted to show this to you. We've been trying to figure out different ways of using HCR in our clinical practice. So if anybody has any questions, I would love to answer them. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.